In the previous lesson, we learned how to use DynamoDB to create some tables where we will store items. I created a few tables. We called them artists, albums, and users. These tables are currently empty, so now we actually have to populate those tables. We're going to learn how to do that using boto3. So the first thing I did was create a new Python script called crud.py because we're going to learn how to create, read, update, and delete items in a table in DynamoDB. We installed boto3 earlier, so we can import that package. And once we do that, we can get a reference to DynamoDB. So we'll do boto3.resource DynamoDB. And then we can get a reference to a particular table. So I'm going to do artist table equals DynamoDB.table. And then I can give it the name of a table. And when I do that, I should be able to print out this table. So I'll run that. And when I run it, you'll see I have a reference to a DynamoDB table named artist. So once I have a reference to the artist table, I can use the put item command in order to create a record. So I'll use put item here. So I'll do artist table dot put item. And then all boto3 wants is an item. And I pass it a dictionary with a bunch of keys and values. So earlier I created this table in the web console. You can see artist is here, and you can see there's no items yet, but I called the ID, the primary key ID, and I also have Spotify ID as one of the keys here. So I'm going to create a new item and give it a dictionary, and so I need to give it an ID that has some value, and I need to give it a Spotify ID with some value. And then I can also give the artist a name. So I'll use a name here, and this will just be an extra attribute that we define. So earlier I got a list of some of my favorite artists and put them in a CSV file here. And so you see I have At the Drive-In, Deftones, Flaming Lips, Outkast, and so forth. And I also already got their Spotify IDs. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and parse this CSV file and then load those into DynamoDB. So let me comment this out for a second. Let me make sure my logic is right to populate a record in a DynamoDB. So what I'll do is first make sure I can read a file. So I have a file called artist.csv. So in Python, I can do for line in open, and then it's in the same directory. So I'll just do artist.csv and use read lines on it to read all the lines in the file. And so let's print a line and see if that works. So I'm going to run it again, and you'll see I get a line for each line in the file that's printed out. And then so for that line, I can go ahead and split that line into the Spotify ID and the artist. So let me split that up. I can do Spotify ID, comma, artist. So I'll do a tuple equals line dot split, and I'll split it on the comma. And then let me print Spotify ID and print the artist. Let me make sure that works. We check our work as we go, and you see that's working nicely. So I have variables that store the Spotify ID and the artist, and I also have a put item command here. So I'm going to do that in a loop and try to insert all the records from that file. So I have the artist table, put item, I'm going to do ID. And so we said we'd generate this using Python. So what we can do is import UUID package, and I can do UUID.UUID4 is what I usually use, which will generate a unique random string. And then I can use the Spotify ID from our file and also the artist name here. So get both of those and then put those into the table. So this should read the file line by line and create records in DynamoDB that correspond to each one. I'll run this again. You'll see the table object has no attribute put item, and that's because I used camel case here. boto3 actually uses put underscore item, so let me try that again. See, I got one more error saying you can't use type class UUID for the value. So for this, we'll actually cast that to a string because we're going to store a string in DynamoDB. It doesn't support this Python UUID object, so we'll print that as a string. So once that's there, I'll run that. Should run, and you can see we got no errors this time. And just to verify, let's look in the AWS console, and we'll click on artists. And look at that. You'll see we have some randomly generated UUIDs. For the primary key, we got the Spotify ID for each of our artists, and now all of our artists are inside of our DynamoDB table here for artists. So that's the create step, put item, and we give it a unique ID for our key, and then we get the Spotify ID because we want that, and we can pass in an arbitrary number of attributes to store for the key value. Cool, so now that's done. Let's see if we can read these out. So I'm gonna get rid of this for a bit, and we still have the artist table. And so now let's see if we can get all of the items in our table. So the first thing boto3 gives us is the scan command. So let's try that. So scan, this scan command will just let us get all of the records or all of the items in this particular table. So scan creates an iterator that will paginate through responses from DynamoDB. Okay, so let's try that. So artist table dot scan, and we'll assign that to artists. And let's see what that looks like. Run that, and you'll see we got a whole bunch of stuff here. But yeah, these look like the records from DynamoDB. You see there's a key in this dictionary called items, and that's a list of all of the items in our DynamoDB artist table. So let's access that key items and see how that works. So for artists in artists items, let's print the artist, and that might be a little cleaner. So let's do that, and let's see how that goes. Okay, as you see here, we have a nice formatted dictionary of each of the artists that we just inserted. We have a uniquely generated ID, and we have the name of the band, and we have the Spotify ID. So that all looks good. One thing, it looks like we have this extra carriage return in here, which I don't like. So let's go ahead and learn how to use the delete command, and let's go ahead and start over here. So I'm going to delete every record in here. So to do that, let's get the key for each of these items. So we have all these keys that were generated. And so let's print out the artist ID for each item. So we have all the IDs. So now what we can do is we can do delete item. So let's use our delete item command. So artists table dot delete item, and then here we can do item equals, and then we just pass it in the ID that we care about, and we have the artist ID here, so we should be able to go in and delete all of those records now. So let's see if that works. Okay, item must be one of table name, key, expected, etc. Okay, so what happened here is I said item equals, but I want to delete an item by key, so I'm going to do key equals. And if I run that now, the provided key element does not match the schema. And I think that's because I also need to give it the Spotify ID. And so let me add that as well. And let's see if I can delete it there. Okay, so now I passed it the whole key with the Spotify ID, and I was able to delete the items. And so now, if we look and print the artists, there might not even be any items because we deleted them all. So let me print artists. That response, and we'll probably see that there's no actual items key anymore because everything's been deleted. Okay, cool. Okay, so that's how it works. We have an items key, but you see it's an empty array, so there's no items anymore in this table. And so now let's go ahead and recreate those artists. So we know how to use create, and we know how to do a delete. Okay, so let's go back to a bit earlier where we were reading through the file line by line, and we split on the Spotify ID and artist ID, or the artist name, and put those items into the table. So now let's go ahead and do the extra processing we wanted to do. Now that we've deleted all the items, let's recreate them, and I'll use the Python strip command here, which should strip off those extra carriage returns, and then we'll print artist table.scan items. And then let's see and make sure we got rid of those carriage returns. So run this again, and you'll see we have our dictionary of items have already been created, and you'll see I have the name now without all the carriage returns. So I have a nice dictionary here that looks just like I want it. So that's been created from the file. So we've done the create, we've deleted, and we've recreated the objects. And we've also read objects in by using the scan method.